She was on television before she knew what television really meant, before homework and sleepovers and figuring out who your best friend is, and all the ordinary, unremarkable, irreplaceable things that make up a childhood. Park Eun-bin was already working, already performing, already being watched, already carrying the weight of a career that most adults spend their entire lives trying to build. She was 7 years old. And here's the thing that gets me every time I think about her story. She never complained. Not once. Not publicly. She just kept going. Project after project, decade after decade, with a professionalism and a grace that made it easy to forget that underneath all of it was a little girl who grew up in front of cameras instead of in a backyard. But grace isn't the same as fine. And Park Eun-bin's story is proof that you can build something extraordinary and still grieve what it cost you. Park Eun-bin, born September 4th, 1992, in Seoul, South Korea. She made her acting debut in 1995. She was 3 years old. Let that land for a second. By the time most kids are starting elementary school, Eunbin had already been a working actress for 4 years. By the time her peers were navigating middle school friendships and figuring out who they were, she had a filmography that most seasoned actors would envy. Child actress, teen actress, young adult lead, and then, after a career that should have been more than enough, the roles that made international audiences completely fall in love with her. Reply 88, The King's Affection, and then Extraordinary Attorney Woo, the show that turned her from a beloved Korean actress into a global phenomenon almost overnight. On paper, it's one of the most remarkable careers in Korean entertainment history. But paper, as we've established, never tells the whole story. Let's start where her story actually starts. Not with the awards, not with the viral moments, with a 7-year-old on a film set. Child actors in Korea, in most of the world honestly, exist in a space that nobody quite knows how to talk about honestly. Because, on one level, yes, some children genuinely love performing. The camera doesn't frighten them, the attention feels natural. And Eunbin, by all accounts, was one of those children. But loving something and being ready for the full weight of it are two completely different things. When you're a child actor at the level Eunbin was, consistent, visible, in demand, your life organizes itself around the work. School happens around filming schedules, not the other way around. Friendships are harder to build because your time isn't your own. The ordinary rhythms of childhood, the boredom, the freedom, the unstructured time where you figure out who you actually are, those get compressed or skipped entirely. She's talked about this in interviews with a kind of careful honesty that clearly took years to arrive at, about not having had a normal childhood, about watching peers live experiences she never had access to, about the strange disorientation of being a professional in a child's body. What nobody saw was the loneliness of that, being surrounded by adults on set all day, being treated as a colleague, a professional, an asset, when part of you still just wanted to be a kid. The teenage years, pressure without pause. If childhood was complicated, adolescence was its own specific kind of hard. Because here's what happens when you've been famous since you were 7 and you hit your teenage years. The industry doesn't pause for you to figure yourself out. It doesn't give you a grace period to be awkward and uncertain and unformed the way every teenager deserves. It just keeps expecting the same level of professionalism from a 16-year-old that it got from a 10-year-old. And Eunbin delivered, consistently, without visible cracks. But the pressure of that, of maintaining a public image through the most internally turbulent years of a person's life, leaves marks that don't always show on the outside. She's mentioned in interviews the weight of always being watched, of never quite having the privacy that most teenagers take for granted, of feeling like she had to be on even when she desperately needed to be off. The industry's beauty standards and the quiet battle. This part of her story doesn't get talked about enough. Korean entertainment has beauty standards that are, by any honest measure, brutal. And for a young actress growing up inside that system, being evaluated not just on talent, but on appearance, on weight, on whether she fit the visual mold that the industry had decided was acceptable, that takes a toll, quietly, persistently, in ways that compound over years. Eunbin has never made this a headline. She's not someone who performs her struggles for public consumption, but if you read between the lines of enough interviews, you find a person who spent a significant portion of her 20s in a complicated relationship with the pressure to look a certain way in an industry that watched her constantly. That's not a small thing, especially for someone who never had the protected space of a normal adolescence to build a stable sense of self before the industry started weighing in. The romantic life that stayed hidden. Park Eun-bin's personal life is essentially classified information. No confirmed relationships, no dating scandals, a level of privacy around her heart that is almost architectural in its thoroughness. And again, two readings. One, healthy boundaries, admirable privacy. Good for her. But two, when you've spent your entire life performing for other people, when your professional identity was established before your personal one had a chance to form, when every relationship exists inside the fishbowl of public scrutiny, intimacy becomes complicated in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. She's hinted at loneliness in quiet ways, at finding it difficult to fully separate work from self, at the strange reality of playing deeply emotional romantic roles on screen while keeping her actual emotional life completely sealed off from public view. That gap between the intimacy she performs and the intimacy she allows herself is its own kind of heartbreak. The career plateau that nobody talks about. Here's the part of her story that gets glossed over in the extraordinary Attorney Woo celebration narrative. Before Woo Young-woo, there was a stretch in Eunbin's career where, despite her talent, despite her 2 decades of experience, the roles weren't matching what she was capable of. She was working, she was always working, but there's a difference between working and being seen, between taking roles because they're available and taking roles that crack you open and show the world something new. She spent years in that in-between space, too experienced to be a newcomer, not quite in the conversation for the prestige leading roles that her talent absolutely warranted. For someone who had given the industry literally everything, her childhood, her adolescence, her entire young adulthood, that quiet period of underutilization must have stung in ways she would never say out loud. And then, Attorney Woo walked into her life. Extraordinary Attorney Woo was not supposed to be the phenomenon it became. A drama about a brilliant autistic lawyer with a love of whales. It sounds niche. It sounds like a slow burn at best. It became one of the most watched Korean dramas globally in 2022. It broke streaming records. It made Park Eun-bin a household name in countries where Korean drama fans had previously never encountered her work. But more than the numbers, more than the awards, the international press, the sudden explosion of global recognition, what Attorney Woo gave Eunbin was a character that required everything she had. Woo Young-woo needed precision and warmth and vulnerability and steel all at the same time. She needed to be simultaneously the most capable person in the room and the most isolated. She needed to make an audience feel protective of her and in awe of her in the same breath. Park Eun-bin didn't just play that character, she inhabited her, with a depth and a specificity that could only come from someone who understood, on a cellular level, what it feels like to be extraordinary at something while quietly carrying a private world that nobody else gets to see. 20 years of everything she'd been through, every sacrifice, every lonely film set, every year of being underestimated went into that performance, and the world finally saw all of it. Park Eun-bin today is someone who has, finally, arrived at herself. The global recognition that attorney Woo brought opened doors that 2 decades of consistent work had somehow kept slightly closed. The king's affection showed her range in one direction. Castaway Diva showed it in another. She is not done surprising people. Her fan base, built across literal decades, loyal across multiple generations of Korean drama viewers, has now been expanded to include people on every continent who found her through a whale-loving lawyer and stayed for everything else. She still protects her private life fiercely, still carries a certain quiet dignity that has been there since she was 7 years old on a film set. But there's something lighter about her now, something that looks from the outside like peace, like someone who finally feels that the cost was worth it. Park Eun-bin gave this industry her childhood, her adolescence, 20 years of showing up completely, professionally, and without complaint. And what her story quietly teaches us is this: sacrifice doesn't always look like suffering. Sometimes it looks like a little girl smiling perfectly for the camera while quietly missing something she can't name yet. And sometimes the most extraordinary performances come from people who have spent their whole lives learning how to carry things beautifully. Drop the name of the Korean celebrity you want us to cover next in the comments. We'll get there.